Shalom from Jerusalem. This is Middle East Review, our monthly assessment of events in our region with Dr. retired Colonel Eran Lerman, formerly with the National Security Staff and the Directorate of Military Intelligence of the IDF.
Way back.
Welcome, Eran.
Always good to be here.
Right. I'm Amir Oren, sitting in for Ambassador Dani Ayalon, one time only. And Eran, let's first start by delineating the borders of our region, because it seems to expand in strange ways, including to Somaliland. So when we talk about the Middle East, what are we talking about?
Well, Amir, you know my ideological objection to the very term Middle East, which I consider to be a British colonial relic. It's halfway to the Far East and then the extreme or East, Japan and Korea as they appear in the Anglo-Japanese Treaty.
But the Chinese used to call themselves the Middle Kingdom.
Exactly. They are, if you look at it from a Chinese perspective, this is West Asia. And for me, Israel is very much, and we saw this in the month under review, is very much part of the Eastern Mediterranean. And we had a trilateral summit of Greece, Cyprus, and Israel in Jerusalem, the first since the beginning of the war, more than 2 years ago.
There was a time when the Israeli national soccer team had to play in the West Asia competition before it was relegated to Europe.
Or raised to the European level. The bottom line is Greece and Cyprus are part of our strategic environment. Obviously, the so-called Middle East in its wider sense, with even sometimes some people would count Pakistan as a border between the subcontinent and Middle East. And the Red Sea basin and the northern Arabian Sea are also of strategic interest because, for example, the Iranian proxy regime in parts of Yemen, the Houthis, have become a strategic consideration for Israel. And therefore, the combination of forces, United Arab Emirates in Socotra and elsewhere in South Yemen, and now Somaliland, are part of a much larger game which everything connects.
Even if we look at it from the Washington perspective, in the late 60s, after the British have announced that they are withdrawing their forces and their interests east of Suez.
East of Suez, yes.
The Americans have gone in gradually. At first, they had what they called the Mideast Force in Bahrain, headed by a one-star admiral, with a very, very small...
Which is now the naval component of...
a flotilla or regatta, whatever they had. And then, of course, they built the Rapid Deployment Force, which turned into the Central Command.
I still remember when Central Command was established, Israel and Syria and Lebanon still in conflict in the early and mid-80s. Israel was cut out completely. CENTCOM officers wouldn't touch us with a 10-foot pole. But now Israel is the most powerful, important military ally in the CENTCOM AOR, which has immense significance for the entire
But the
region.
reason for what you just mentioned was that the Cold War was still on, and the Pentagon viewed Israel as a possible partner in World War III, and therefore the entire focus of EUCOM, the European Command, was vis-a-vis the Soviet Union, and Israel was considered part
of a minor adjunct
of the of the southern flank, and therefore, and the Mediterranean, the Syrian naval and air bases for the Soviets, but that is
long history.
Past history. Now, we are at the turn of the year. This is our first broadcast of 2026 of Middle East Review. And as we look back at the last month or so of 2025 and ahead to at least the foreseeable future, even though events can overtake us at any moment. What would you consider the main focus or hotspot, or if you can't find one, hotspots in the Middle East as we look ahead?
Well, I was trying to categorize what we have in front of us. I would say we have two remarkable events unfolding and three remarkable non-events not unfolding. In other words, in Iran, we have a drama which is very difficult to predict, internal disturbances of this kind and internal upheaval are almost by definition non-linear and extremely difficult to predict. Nobody in the beginning of 2011 thought that within 2 months, President Mubarak will be sitting in a cage on a stage in a trial for his life. And nobody in the 1st of December 2024.
Wait, but hold on. After the Egyptians have overturned the Mubarak regime, which of course was preceded by Sadat, who was preceded by Nasser, then everyone extrapolated that the same is probably going to happen to the Assad dynasty. And as you well remember, Ehud Barak said that
5 weeks.
He didn't put that tag. He said his days are numbered, and 3,000
days
or more
later.
days later.
But truly, I don't think anyone predicted on the 1st of December 2024 that within a week the Syrian regime will evaporate as if it never existed, and we cannot.
But there are revolutionary terms, revolutionary conditions which must prevail. For instance, when the Shah fell, the Iranian armed forces stood aside. They did not join the revolutionaries, but they refused to fire at the masses, at the demonstrators. This is
in the case of Egypt, by the way, they had an clear American instruction. Don't, or you would be cut off from.
And this was Obama, now we have Trump. However, we don't see in Iran right now any force within the Revolutionary Guards or the Basij willing to at least be neutral, not to manage a counter-revolution.
Amir, I'm not entirely sure. I've heard from people I trust that the Basijis and the Pasaran have been running internal surveys. And that was a few months back, but it still resonates with me. And last year, for the first time, they actually were told by a majority of the troops, because the IRGC now is no longer just an ideologically driven group of young revolutionaries. It is a regular
military-industrial complex
with a lot of business interests in the complexes that they control, and regular recruits. And for the first time, a majority said they will not shoot. And my impression is that they are being very cautious now, that they're not, maybe because of the Trump warning, maybe because they no longer have confidence.
The very fact that, regarding what you recount, the very fact that recruits or other service people would expose themselves by giving such a response, by saying in advance, and not being fearful of being disciplined. That's remarkable.
Look at the hijab protest. It was brutally put down, and then they stopped enforcing the hijab, more or less. I mean, you see more and more on the social media. You see more and more Iranian women with their hair in the wind. Seriously, I think the regime is losing its sense of confidence that it can impose its will on the Iranian people.
But it only goes to show the flexibility of those in power when they prefer to contain rather than confront. The core of the regime, at least during the first week or so, or couple of weeks of these demonstrations, the core seems to have held.
So far. But this time it's not just the intellectuals and the students. I remember years back, 11 or 12 years back, there was another wave of serious demonstrations. And I was still in government, and I was having a conversation with, of all people, the Chinese military attaché.
A senior colonel.
A senior colonel.
Yes, they have this rank.
And which is our brigadier. And he says, it sounded like a Chinese aphorism. He says, 10,000 students, no guns, nothing.
Tiananmen.
And he was, he knew what he was talking.
Yeah.
But when it spreads to the bazaar, and if it spreads from the bazaar to Islam Shahar, to the huge poor quarters of southern Tehran, then the game is a different one. And I would not risk any prediction.
But there is no viable opposition. Khomeini, if you look in another corner of society, the Tudeh, the pro-communist elements, they were an alternative to the Shah, the corrupt regime of the Shah. Here, obviously, a majority of the people detest the Ayatollahs. They would love to see them toppled. But there is not even a Lech Walesa.
No, not yet. But these things happen very quickly. And they can, all I'm saying is that the collapse of regimes is not a linear business with the ship slowly sinking. It can be very dramatic, very disruptive.
Much like a 9/11.
Yes, it could.
Or Chernobyl, if you take another unforeseen...
Yes, that's unforeseen in a different way. If the moment there's a crack in the enforcement mechanism, then things can go very fast. In any case, the entire region is very much, waiting and watching. The Americans have put in the warning to the regime not to shoot.
Is it credible?
Well, we're not going to go into Venezuela, but after Venezuela, anyone who says that, I don't, take Trump at his word is doing it at his own risk. If Khamenei now thinks that Trump is bluffing, he maybe should call his former friend in a New York jail.
So we are not going to hide our preferences. So let's try, along this wishful thinking, to see a scenario. For instance, there were several locations where the demonstrations, at least were reported about, like Mashhad. Can the Persian Empire disintegrate into provinces and districts where the central government in Tehran is fearful of sending troops over because they may defect and join the protesters?
Theoretically, it could happen. I mean, the north is Azeri and Kurdish. In the south west, you have Arabs in Hawaii.
And there was an Azeri republic
when the Soviets
right after
tried to stay after 45. And the Baluch, who happen, I think, also to be Sunnis rather than Shia, have been restive for a long time. And the relations between Iran and Pakistan are paradoxical because they came to blows last year and for a short while.
And usually
it could happen.
We conflate Iranian with Persian, but demographically...
About half the Iranians.
And a quarter Azeri and another quarter Hotspots.
Khamenei himself is part Azeri at least. The other way of looking at it is that this could lead let's say the nationally minded leadership in Tehran to rally around the flag in order to prevent disintegration. We saw this, by the way, in Iraq after 91, when the Shia South rose.
Basra.
And the North and the Kurds rose. And the result was that the officers who should have shot Saddam for his idiotic failure actually rallied around him. The Sunnis rallied around him and kept Iraq under one hand for another 12 years. So another thing that could happen, directly as a result of what Khamenei concludes from looking from Venezuela to Trump's warning to to Israel's language about the missile program and the nuclear effort, is to actually say the one way to safeguard Iranian sovereignty and the revolution is to accelerate the strategic efforts against the interest of the people who want to see the money, buying bread, and rather than becoming utterly worthless. They may actually go exactly in the opposite direction. We need to be prepared for both possibilities. The Iranian regime accelerating its
missiles rather than merchandise.
Missile, yes, not the guns, not butter, as they used to say, but now it's missiles and not merchandise. And even the nuclear project. The nuclear project can look as the one guarantee against the kind of intervention that the hegemonic great Satan may be planning. So we have to be, I think the intelligence effort now vis-a-vis Iran has to be at its top.
So we have been using this cliche regarding the octopus, and assuming that the octopus loses its head. Mm-hmm. What happens to the tentacles, the Houthis, for instance?
Well, that's an interesting question because right now, another dramatic event, or let's say a set of dramatic events, which seem to me interconnected, as I said, have to do with what's happening around Bab el-Mandab and the southern approaches to the Red Sea, because I see a connection between the resumed initiative of the United Arab Emirates in supporting the STC, the southern forces in Yemen, and Israel's recognition of...
but the Saudis are against the Emiratis.
Right. And right now we have a strange situation in which the Saudis and the Emiratis are actually proxies are fighting each other, and while the Houthis have a reprieve.
It's a similar example to what happens in Libya, where the Egyptians are for one half, and the Turks and the others...
for the other. And while the Turks and the Egyptians have common interest in the things are getting extremely complicated because when being your enemy's enemy doesn't necessarily make you your friend. But in the case of the Houthis, they are vulnerable. The Emirati-supported forces in Yemen have proved much more capable of taking action against them. With Israel firmly entrenched in Somaliland, and I believe that the formal recognition is because from a certain level onwards, you cannot do covertly what we intend to do there.
But isn't this the price for the Somaliland, not the recognition, but for their approval of Israeli actions from the Somaliland coast and probably bases?
I allow myself to assume that the infrastructure has been there for some time. This did not happen because Netanyahu woke up in the middle of the night, looked at the map and said...
Well, for decades, Israel in the Horn of Africa, in Eritrea, in Ethiopia, parts of which were Somaliland, Israel had acted as part of the peripheral strategy of David Ben-Gurion and Mossad.
A variation on it, yes. And we definitely, now we have to manage a very interesting angle, which is how to ally with Ethiopia, the most powerful player in that region, in order to cut down the ability of the Houthis to strangle Eilat and fire at Tel Aviv without angering the Egyptians on the question of the Renaissance Dam, because in Egypt there's a whole notion that somehow this is a Jewish conspiracy. We want to drink the Nile with a long straw. It's crazy. We need to reassure the Egyptians that while I used to say this to the Greeks way back when we allied with Turkey, I said, this is about Syria and Iraq. We do not intend to roll with the Turks to your side of the bed. So we have to say the same to the Egyptians. We have a business with the Ethiopians. We have an issue, which is also your issue, because you suffered even more
Looking
than us.
eastward
Looking eastward,
rather than northward.
Northward. We don't have, as they say in good Arabic, la gamal lana wala naka. We don't have a camel or a she-camel in this race when it comes to the dam. But we do need the Ethiopians because their backing for Somaliland will enable us to act effectively against the Houthis next time they.
And by the way,
They play
during the
part for Iran.
during the Entebbe operation, which is shortly going to be marked as the 50th anniversary of Israel, of course.
Our gift to America on its bicentennial.
Right. Israel cooperated with Kenya.
Yes.
However, for emergency landings, Ethiopia was available.
And so this is geopolitics at a level that we did not experience before. Israel is now a significant, powerful player in the Eastern Mediterranean, in the Southern Red Sea. It has, I believe, an affinity of interest with the United Arab Emirates, which unfortunately we do not have with the Saudis to nearly the same
So
extent.
let's try.
And these are the dramatic events. The non-events are in Gaza, where nothing is happening, Lebanon, where nothing is happening, and Syria, where instability
So hold it for Gaza.
is stable.
If we look from the Gulf, the Persian or the Arabian Gulf, inward towards our inner circle, the core, the United Arab Emirates, having diplomatic relations with Israel, is acting in Yemen along with Israel. We have parallel interests. Then,
And some people say more than just interests.
more than just interest. Now, if you go to the Bab el-Mandeb Straits and the Red Sea, you have the Egyptians against the Ethiopians. Both are necessary for Israel strategically. Then you take Egypt towards Gaza. Again, Egypt was one of the mediating countries regarding the hostages, but Egypt borders Gaza. It is against the Muslim Brotherhood,
Right.
And Hamas is an offshoot of the Brotherhood. What does Egypt want Israel to do and not to do in Gaza?
Well, it's paradoxical because, of course, Israel and Egypt have to give their consent under or their active cooperation and coordination, I think that's the language, under UN Security Council Resolution 2803 to the establishment of the International Stabilization Force in Gaza. The key question now is whether this force will ever be put together. But if it is, then Egypt and Israel are the key players. It can only operate. It already has a makeshift headquarters on Israeli territory, which is unbelievable. The whole thing belongs to the realm of science fiction. Arab officers from the UAE, from Bahrain, Greeks and Cypriots and Egyptians, they're all under an American aegis, sitting in the same.
But they are staff officers. They are not commanding troops.
No. The troops are not yet. The problem is the troops are not yet there, and the December conference in Doha, in which the CENTCOM tried to recruit volunteers to send their brigades or battalions to the ISF, seems to have been essentially a failure.
Maybe Venezuela will contribute.
Well, you have to ask Machado, but she's not yet there. The bottom line is, the Colombians, for years were in Sinai, the MFO in Sinai. Egypt and Israel must come to basic understandings. I think they want to see Hamas removed. I think they want to see them disarmed. They cannot tolerate the consequences of another round, catastrophic rounds, which ultimately they managed to persuade Israel not to push the Gazans over into Sinai. But, you never know. With today's Israel, you never know where things could go from their perspective. So they need to have an understanding with us. We need an understanding with them. Managing the Rafah crossing Israel is not withdrawing from its side. The Hamas enclave, the 47% of Gaza, which are still under Hamas, is completely surrounded by Israeli forces. Paradoxically, it means that Israel does not feel any urgency.
Not completely. There is still the coastal front,
yes, but
where the Turks threaten to.
The Navy will take care. The Navy, if necessary, the Air Force. The bottom line is, paradoxically, it means that Israel, which has the hand, is not under any time constraint to resolve the Gaza situation, because the threat of a Hamas onslaught on the Israeli people has been, to a large extent, removed. The need to disarm Hamas remains a strategic imperative, but it's not an urgent one. And so the stalemate is not necessarily...
And there is the Sinai front or problem of Bedouins, smuggling...
Smugglers, guns, drugs, women, whatever.
Right, it has become a national security problem for Israel.
At least the fence works. So now the challenge is to intercept drones, which is a fascinating issue in itself. The technologies do exist. You need to put money and attention to it, but this is not a strategic
But you
question.
see, Dr.
It's
Lerman,
tactical.
when we started this conversation, we showed our concern that the Middle East is too large to encompass in one less than 30-minute show. And this is why we will have to wait until next month to see whether the puzzles which we talked about have been solved already. So this has been Middle East Review for the month of January 2026. Thank you very much, Dr. Colonel Eran Lerman. And we will be back, not we, but Danny Ayalon and Eran Lerman will be back.
As they say in the region, inshallah.
Right. For Middle East Review next month. For the time being, shalom from Jerusalem.
My name is Eran Lerman. I used to be Deputy National Security Advisor to the Government of Israel, currently Vice President of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security, a think tank, and the editor of the Jerusalem Strategic Tribune. For the last few years, I've been a regular panelist for TV7, a fantastic opportunity to bring deep and analytical perspectives to the debate over regional affairs, Israeli affairs, international affairs, in the company of some of the best minds in Israel.